The power of sisterhood can be amazing, despite and sometimes because of the imperfections each person brings to the relationship. When sisters unite in heart, soul, and energy, magic can happen. And as soul sisters know, sisterhood doesn't require biological connection to take root. It simply requires imperfect love. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. I have two sisters, but we have little contact, partly due to geographical distance and partly because we grew up in a high-conflict household where we were pitted against each other. What steps can I take to reconnect with my sisters or find a sister-like connection elsewhere? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by two very special guests, Eunice and Sabrina Moyle, who will be sharing their expertise on sisterhood. These two guests are the authors of books on family, on sisterhood. One is My Sister is Super, My Brother is the Best, and they have a new series, The Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella. Welcome to the podcast, Sabrina and Eunice.
Thank you so much, Carla. We are very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I just love your energy, love what you bring to the world. So before we get going into the listener's question, because I know you two have so much experience in sisterhood, working with sisterhood, writing about sisterhood, bringing the beautiful energy of soul sisterhood into the world. So first, please tell me, that we'll start with Eunice. Eunice, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm the illustrator of Hello Lucky. I do, all the illustrations for all of our book cards, design. And, I don't know, I'm eternally a sort of a Peter Pan. I'm 50 years old and I, roller skate and dance hip hop and do all kinds of random things that you would expect out of an 18-year-old. So I refuse to grow up, but I really believe in like living life with joy. And learning new things constantly. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And you mentioned Hello Lucky. I happen to know a little bit about Hello Lucky, but will you tell listeners a little bit about Hello Lucky?
So Hello Lucky is a company that Sabrina and I founded, ages ago, dinosaur age, I think 2003, right?
Yes.
And it started out as a card company. It, as is my want, I decided to learn how to print letterpress and just bought a machine, parked it in my garage and figured out how to use it and how to fix it. And we sort of started kind of here and there a little bit by accident, and slowly but surely it built and built and built until I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, we shifted focus from 100% cards to cards and children's books. And that's been amazing, super fulfilling. And we also are doing children's games as well now. And it's just a dream. It's a dream.
I could talk to you for hours about your life. Behind you, I see a dressmaker figure. I saw a
Indeed.
fur baby walk through. Please tell me about the dressmaking and the fur baby.
The dressmaking. Well, I actually got a degree in fashion design on a whim during one of the several web busts where I got laid off and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so, as is my nature, I decided I'll learn a new thing, maybe take a new direction, which I never did anything with. But I put it down for about, 20 years maybe. And then during the pandemic, I was trapped at home and started looking for creative outlets and aside from my work, and discovered that 20 years later there's just amazing resources on YouTube, like tons of incredible indie patterns and all these options that just weren't available 20 years before. Like technology has changed everything. And so I started learning to sew and was able to do Zoom classes with incredible expert sewists like all over the world. And, and now it's gotten to the point where I've been doing custom tailoring. I made my husband a suit most recently with all hand sewn. And I'm a huge nerd for anything like that. So I love little, technical details and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's the sewing thing. And now I make a lot of my clothes and I knit as well. And, I'm always looking for some new project. And the fur babies, we have Freddie, who is a Labra Golden Doodle blend, best dog ever, very sweet. And we have a cat named Saint-Jean, which means no shame because she adopted us while we were living in France, just rolled into our house and decided she belonged to us. And so we brought her back from France. So she's a true French cat and actually kind of looks like that black French cat in the classic French poster. I forget what it's for, but there's a classic black cat poster. And she is basically that cat.
Okay, that is a lot. Now, one last question. You said letterpress. What is a
Mhm.
letterpress? I think I should know this, but I don't.
Oh yeah. So letterpress is sort of the original, not mass production exactly, but original printing form. It was what they printed the Gutenberg Bible on. It was the first sort of machine on which you could print lots of stuff. And so I had a Vandercook, which is an old school, like I think it's from the 40s that I got off of eBay, where you crank the paper through one piece at a time. And it's essentially like you can kind of imagine it like block printing almost. You basically make a plate using, probably too complicated to explain, but anyway, you make a plate that's essentially like a rubber stamp or a block print, and each plate is a single color. So you put it down on the press, run paper through, and then line everything up. But that's how
Ah,
commercial printing used to be back in like the long time ago. So yeah, but it was a really easy way to learn. I mean, basically the reason I did it was because I didn't have the money to have a printer print my cards for me. And so I said to myself, well, I can learn how to print it, admittedly in a more slow way, but I could do it myself. And that gave me a lot more options in terms of experimentation that I wouldn't have been able to afford had I had to pay, a commercial printer with minimums and things like that. So
okay. So one one more question. I've bought Hello Lucky cards. Are they
yes,
still printed
they
on that
are.
press? Because they have
Well,
such
not
a,
on this press.
but
Sorry, go
on a
ahead.
similar type press then.
Yeah, yeah. So
Ah.
now we have a really amazing women-run company in Portland, Oregon called Egg Press, who does all of our printing and our distribution. Like we do now only creative, and we've collaborated with them for them to do all of the sort of sales, distribution, and production of our cards, which is awesome because it gives us so much more room for creativity
And there are
and
some
development of new
cards.
stuff.
Listeners can't if you're not watching on video, these cards are amazing and they feel good. In your hands,
Yeah,
they feel good, they feel special, they feel substantial.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Amazing
You're
background.
welcome.
I could keep going. All right, Sabrina, tell us a little bit about you. What makes you you?
Yeah. So I co-founded Hello Lucky with Eunice. I'm the writer. So I write all of our children's books. I come up with concepts for our greeting cards. I kind of provide art direction. Eunice and I are really a kind of creative collaborative team. I was just talking to the publisher who works on our books, and he was like, yeah, I really think of you guys as a unit.
Yeah.
Really are a creative unit. It's pretty amazing. And I also run the business side of Hello Lucky.
Ah,
Thank goodness, because I hate all business side type activities.
the yin and the yang. Here, here,
Yeah.
here we have them together. So, oh my goodness. And Sabrina, you have children?
Yes, I have three kids, and my background is in both art history and fine art and business. So I have an MBA in addition to having studied art history. And in the process of starting the business with Eunice, I've just become a writer. I've always loved to write, but it kind of happened organically, and it didn't really flourish until we started writing children's books, and I was in my 40s.
Oh, what a beautiful story. So I remember you two didn't have a traditional household growing up.
No.
Okay, who wants to tell me about what a nice, calm childhood you had, always being in one place, right?
I'd
Not.
be happy. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it. And it does relate to your listener's question in terms of having there be a lot of conflict at home. There definitely was a lot of conflict. So we were raised by a father who is from the Midwest, from Minnesota. So very kind of traditional Midwestern background. And our mother was born in China and raised in Taiwan. So English wasn't her first language. The two of them could communicate, but there were a lot of cultural and personality differences growing up, a lot of different expectations about how we should be raised, and the usual. And our dad's job was he was a foreign service officer. So we moved every 2 to 3 years and lived for the most part in Asia and in North Africa. And then we moved to the United States when my dad retired when we were in high school. So Eunice was a senior in high school. I was a junior in high school, and we moved to Eugene, Oregon, which, if you've ever been there, is a very homogenous, small university town. And at the time, there were not very many Asian people living there. So we moved there, and my dad was suddenly found himself retired, and our mother was going through menopause with 2 teenage daughters and feeling isolated. So you can bet there was a lot of conflict there.
Oh yeah. Early menopause also, that she was not aware was happening. She was only 41.
Oh my
So
goodness.
so she didn't have any of the hormones, nothing, because she had no idea that it was even happening. She was just super pissed off all the time.
Yeah. So
Uh-oh.
Eunice and I grew up in that kind of environment, and it was, there was obviously a lot of really positive things about it, but definitely could relate to what your listener was saying. I think whether they intended to or not, to some extent, we did feel sibling rivalry. We did feel sometimes like we were, not necessarily, well, I guess pitted against each other is fair. I think Eunice was often characterized as being the artist, and I was kind of characterized as being like the all around, academic superstar or whatever, like I could do anything I wanted. And so there were ways in which from a young age, we both kind of felt a little boxed in. And I think that did, that can create tension in sister relationship. And so over the course of choosing to work together, because we basically drifted apart when we were in college, and we only really came back together when we both happened to move back to the Bay Area. And Eunice had this business idea to start a greeting card business, and I had just gotten my MBA, and I said, hey, I'll help out. And so we had this project to work on together. We started working on it. And that's when our relationship really started to develop and grow. And through having this shared project, we both evolved, and our relationship became closer and closer to the point now where we have this incredible creative collaboration. But it was definitely a journey. So happy to share insights that might help your listener through our own experiences.
Thank you. So Eunice, you were the wild child, and I see your poster behind you, Dance It Out. I can
Yeah.
just imagine.
I firmly believe in dancing things out.
So what was it growing up with a rock star, superstar, academic older sister?
Well, it's funny because I feel like I sort of have the personality of a golden retriever. Like I just kind of am a little bit weirdly naturally zen. And so it's funny because I remember Sabrina feeling a lot of sort of sibling rivalry. And I remember being kind of oblivious to that. Like I was good at art, and honestly, I had no interest in being better at anything. That was the easy thing for me. And so, I had moments where I was like, maybe science. And then I was like, too much math, back to the art. So, but my, our parents definitely, she was the theater person and she was the math person. And so there was definitely a little bit of division. I think they meant well. I think they thought they were keeping us from competing against each other. And they worried that Sabrina being very competitive, I was like, I'm just not even remotely competitive, but Sabrina being very competitive, they worried that she would feel frustrated because I was, 2 years older, therefore would always be better than her at things theoretically. So I think that was their intention, but it didn't necessarily work out the way they intended, so they meant well.
So it's interesting listening. It feels to me as if part of the reason the two of you got along as well as you did is because you were naturally not competitive and you opted out of comparing yourself to your sister. And I'm not a fan of comparing ourselves. It really creates a lot of negativity. So
Totally.
sounds like you naturally just said, I'm tuning out, I'm going to do, and you are still living this way today. It sounds like you very
For sure.
much embrace being you.
I always tell my kids that comparison is the thief of joy, and there's no point in it at all.
I forget where that quote came from, but it is
I don't know where it came from, but it's good.
a very good one. It's Jefferson or somebody. Anyway,
somebody, yeah,
so somebody.
Totally.
So absolutely, you two have really found a groove, so to speak. And when we go
Definitely.
back to the listener's question, where she had this incredible high conflict, it drove them all apart. Now there's geographical distance. What would you think? Not that we have to know her mind, her soul, but what are I'll ask each of you, first Sabrina, then Eunice. What would you think, Sabrina, she might do to reconnect with her siblings?
Yeah, I mean, I think with healing relationships like this, the first step is to do your own work on yourself and your own perceptions, right? So the first thing is to kind of figure out what it was. How did you develop a story, your own inner story as you were growing up that was separate from your siblings, that pitted you against each other? And it may well have been introduced by parents, but blame doesn't really get you anywhere. So how can you have compassion for your parents and what they were intending? How can you kind of process that so that you're no longer holding on to this old narrative and this bitterness? So I think that is the first step. And then reaching out to your sibling to kind of compare notes and like, hey, this is what it was like for me. What was it like for you? Without attachment to changing their mind and needing to have agreement on the narrative. I think, for a long time, Eunice and I were in conflict, like early on when we started our business. And I think until probably we had kids and started to see things a little bit more clearly. But a lot of times it was like my interpretation of our childhood versus her interpretation and who was right, and that was just
Right.
really fruitless. I mean, it was just a fruitless kind of way of trying to work because it just generated more conflict. And the reality is both people are right. Like both people's experiences are valid. And there's no need to try to blame or somehow demonize parents because all parents are imperfect. They're all trying their best.
Now that we have kids, we know for sure.
Yeah, all parents mess their kids up in some way, right? And siblings can be cruel to each other. And so there's that, it's like, I think it's very true that, familiarity breeds contempt. I think everybody grows up feeling contempt for their siblings or feeling wounded by their siblings. So all of that just needs to be cleaned up in terms of our own inner narrative, right? Clean it up, clear it up, let it go. And then you can kind of reconnect, reach out to your sibling. Yeah, I mean, do a little bit of pairing of notes. I think it was important for Eunice and I to sort of eventually we got on the same page about our parents. Because as we get older, we actually need to start thinking about caring for our parents as they age, et cetera. So we got to a point where we now have a very good mutual understanding and mutual respect for our respective experiences with our parents. And we have both compassion for our parents as well as boundaries. And like, okay, a little bit,
And we don't undermine each other anymore. I feel like in the past, like on my end, in an effort to try to avoid conflict or to paper over, just calm everybody down, I was always sort of the middle person. Like I always used to say I was kind of like the therapist in between the two sides. I stopped trying to do that because that was causing issues as well, and I totally lost my train of thought there, but you know what I'm saying, right, Sabrina?
You were trying to be the middle person.
The middle person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the middle person, and
Right,
you
right.
gave up that role.
Yep.
Exactly.
I was like, you know what? That's not my place. Like, I should not be in the middle trying to, talk to both sides and make people see that they could get along, that kind of thing.
The
Right.
peacekeeper.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
I think as children, we're wired to seek our parents' approval, right?
Mhm.
And yet our parents are very imperfect. So as adults, as adult children, we need to let go of that and realize that we're not competing with each other for our parents' approval. We don't need our parents' approval. What we need is actually to see them clearly and compassionately as the imperfect human beings that they are, and try to create healthy adult relationships with each other and with our parents. So with that kind of shared goal in mind, Eunice and I were really able to get past a lot of the old patterns of behavior that were left over from childhood and the unproductive ways of talking about or seeing our parents, to where we have a much better relationship with our parents now. We have a much better relationship with each other. We're much closer. And it's been obviously helped by the fact that we work together and we have a lot of contact with each other. So circling back to your listener's question, I do think, bit by bit, if I know there's geographic distance, but you do need to have contact with someone, ideally fairly regularly, in order to build and repair a relationship and have those conversations. I would suggest, first doing your own work and then bit by bit simultaneously reaching out and just trying to connect, with her siblings on, initially it might be more on superficial topics, but ideally, if you can start to dance around really getting to the meat of why there's this underlying tension or separation, and if everybody's willing to come to the table and maybe do a little work on it, then that, that can be really, really beneficial and amazing, because ultimately at the end of the day, as siblings, there's so much depth in our relationship and so much to there, as like it's such a deep and unique relationship. So it's a wonderful thing if you can try to heal a relationship and understand you're not alone in having a strained sibling relationship. It happens to most siblings.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
you can heal it, you can repair it. It's all about repair. right? And then you can move forward and really enjoy the fruits of having a sibling, because it is an incredible thing.
Before we get to Eunice, I really want to hear from you next, Eunice. I just want to recap, Sabrina, what you said, because the points you said are so beautiful and helpful. And so, first, look at your inner story, look at your narrative so that you can work on it. And we all have stories. We all have stories. And so, I hear you saying, hey, just let's back up. Let's look at what our inner narrative is, what our story is, and maybe evaluate it, see if we can soften it, shift it to make it work for us instead of against us. So that's number one. Number two, when you're talking to a sibling, you don't need to agree with their perspective. You just need to really honor it and hear it and make space for it. And I know as a clinician, I will often hold up a cup that has two sides to it. And I'll show, a client, I'll say, now, what are you seeing? And they're saying, oh, I see this cup with a flower. And I say, well, actually, my side has, a heart on it. And they say, oh, and that's how relationships are. I'm seeing a heart from my perspective. You're seeing a flower, and we are both seeing accurately from our perspective. So I love that second point. The third, you said you don't need to compete with each other for your parents' attention, for your parents' approval as adults, and how important that is for us to realize, because I think it happens even when we return home for holidays. We get back into that family home and it starts triggering all of these behaviors that we grew up with, that rivalry. So I loved that point. And then I love the boundaries. Have boundaries with your parents as you get older. Have not just boundaries with your siblings and your partners, but boundaries with parents. It really does help. And then fifth, to remember how important it is. Ruptures happen. We make mistakes in relationships. It's part of being imperfect. It's part of being human. And what's so important is doing the repair, realizing that if you love someone, connecting with them, having that connection is far bigger than the fact that they stole your lollipop when you were 10, or, as long as the behavior's not going on, they're still not stealing from you, then it's a good sign. All right. So did I get those points well enough?
Very well put.
There, you put them beautifully, Sabrina. So, Eunice, same question, but slightly different. And you can feel free to add on to anything that your sis said. But what if this listener says, I'm trying, I'm doing the work, I'm trying to do the repair. How can I just find sisters somewhere? Sisters of the heart and spirit. How can I find a new sisterhood of my own? So feel
Oh,
free to,
absolutely.
okay.
I mean, I feel like I always tell my husband, because I feel like men have a different relationship with friends, but I always tell him that like my girlfriends are so, I make time to go out to dinner with them, and we talk about kids, we talk about husbands, we talk about siblings and whatever. And I feel like it's really important to talk with other friends, often female friends, it doesn't have to be, about these things. Because I feel like it helps you understand that you're not alone in the bratty child or the complicated, sibling relationship or relationship with the parents. And it really, I find it so helpful to work these things through with other women, especially. So that's one thing I do all the time. And the other thing I have done, which I feel like works really well for me, is to find activities with like-minded people, like this roller skating thing that I do. I meet with a group of women, we all roller skate together, and in that activity we have something in common and a reason to meet up. And then in the process, it's sort of meditative. You have to kind of focus on it in order to not fall on your butt, for one thing, but also it just gives you, and you go around in circles and you chat and you talk through things and you work things out and get advice from different perspectives. And all of that I feel like is incredibly helpful. But
And so for someone who might not be very extroverted, you seem to
yeah,
be
I am
quite an
not. Oh no, I
you're
am
not an
very, actually not at all. I always joke that I'm sort of an introverted extrovert. Like, with the right people, I'm very chatty, but I find it very challenging to make new friends and to, go to things like parties where I'm going to have to talk to people I don't know. I find it incredibly anxiety inducing.
So you're more of an omnivert or ambivert. So
I
you'll
guess, is that what that
understand
is?
this. Someone in the middle, those are the two phrases that are
Right.
used
Well,
sometimes. So
now
an
I know.
ambivert or omnivert, those are the people in the middle. So you're perfect for this listener, maybe, who I don't know if she's an introvert, extrovert,
Yes.
ambivert, but how would you suggest that she maybe meet someone who could turn into a sister of the soul?
I mean, like I was saying, like, I mean, activities are one way, if you love knitting, join a knitting club. If you love reading, join a book club. And I feel like that's a great, I feel like that's just a great like way to wedge into maybe more deeper friendships. Like that's usually how I find people is through, I mean, I speak French, so I've met, a lot of people through French clubs and activities or lessons and things like that. So that's usually my way. As an adult, I feel like it's very hard to make new friends outside of work. If you don't have work or school or something like that to bring you together with like-minded people, then to me the answer is finding activities that interest you, that might interest somebody else, and that give you a starting point for developing a friendship.
And that makes
And then
perfect
lots of
sense.
dinners.
Lots of dinners together,
A
lots of
walk.
sharing. There you
Yeah.
go. My goodness. So let's look at one more element of this question that's not there, but I'm wondering if it's possibly there. If this listener feels, or someone in her biological family feels like somebody's done something that can't be forgiven, how would you, as a duo, and I'll start with you on this one, Eunice, how would you coach her to know if she wants to forgive, can forgive? I'm going to
I
steer
know this
clear.
might be a better one for Sabrina, honestly. Like I'm tend to be not, I don't know, I have a tendency to just want to let things go and just try to start fresh and try to forgive whenever humanly possible. But I don't know, Sabrina, what do you think? I feel like
Wait
this
a
is much
second. I think
more.
that's a perfect answer,
Oh,
actually.
really?
Just,
Okay.
I think it's a perfect answer. Let me just, and then I promise I'll go to Sabrina and get you off the hot seat on this one. But I wonder, okay, so let's say she's more like you and says, okay, well, they're mad at me because I did this or that, or I was
Yeah,
dad's favorite, and or because I crossed their boundaries. So someone doesn't want to forgive me and I'm willing to forgive them. But this person might need some forgiveness or
yeah.
might saying, hey, you need to ask me you need to apologize. What would you say? Apology? No apology?
I mean, I feel like if to me, if the other person needs to hear an apology in order to be able to move past it, why not give an apology? It's a small thing you can do on your part, but if it gets you past the blockage, to me that's totally worth doing. I mean, I think when in doubt, the best thing you can do is try to have a frank conversation with the other person and try to just like face the issue head on if you can, without pointing fingers. I think of trying not to blame is huge, is really important, and trying not to put the other person on the defensive or anything like that. Being open-minded and being willing to like take the first step seems to me like someplace to start anyway.
And I think that you put it beautifully. And I think when we offer a heartfelt apology, we can usually, if I've, offended someone or hurt their feelings, I can usually find a really heartfelt way to apologize.
Totally.
I might not agree that my intention or whatever, but I can certainly say, I am so sorry. I hear you say that this is what I did. I apologize for doing
Hmm.
that, and I will take great care in the future not to do that again. And if I inadvertently do, please bring it to my attention. And I
Totally.
think when
Well, and
we,
I actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
please go.
Oh, I would say this is kind of hilariously ironic what I'm about to say, but I would say the other thing is to just be willing to listen. Like at one point, my husband and I had, we almost got divorced actually because we were kind of not understanding each other. And he had not talked about his feelings for a very long time and had kind of collected them and had a lot of anger towards me and
Hmm.
frustration. And one of the things I did was just sit there and listen and let him talk for about 3 months. I just let him talk at me and get it all out, and I didn't judge and I didn't like try to defend myself. I just let him talk. And it amazingly like actually saved our marriage to do that, like amongst other things. But that was a huge thing that I had a therapist that told me to do that. And it was so effective. It just gave him space to get his feelings out.
And good for you to be able to do that for 3 months.
It took a lot of patience.
Oh my goodness, what a lot of internal strength. I know this isn't the topic of the podcast, but I do have a question because that's me. Does he now do a better job at bringing
Yeah.
his feelings forward?
Yes, and I also make a point of coming to him and having chat regularly because I know he won't necessarily bring up, it's not sort of in his comfort zone to bring up feelings or how things are going. He has a tendency to hold these things close to the chest, and so I actually make myself go and like find him and sit down and just chat for no reason, just to let him, in case there's something like he's mad about how I load the dishwasher or something is bugging him, I know he won't say it. And so I just I give him space to talk to me about it if there's something there, but not by sitting down and being like, tell me how you feel about this thing. I sense you're angry. More just kind of approaching it from more of a conversational, like, how's your day? And then like trying to just kind of get the chat flowing. And then oftentimes that will lead to things that maybe are bugging him. And it just gives him that release valve. So he's not holding all these feelings that are just going to like blow up 6 months later. I mean, like our mother used to do that and like that. So I'm trying to not recreate that situation where we would always just be like, well, she's not saying anything, so we're just going to get on with our lives and ignore it. And so, and then explosions 6 months in, over something completely minor, but it's actually about lots of stuff that's
All
been
of the
piling up,
resentments, yeah, that
Yeah,
just built
totally,
up.
totally.
You're making me think of how that same strategy often works with kids too, where you just give them that space, just create that
Yeah,
space, and all sorts of things start popping out. Well,
totally.
and here you didn't think you had much to add to that situation. And okay, expert Eunice, we are now
Oh, there
moving
you go.
back to Sabrina. All right, Sabrina, some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think Eunice did put it beautifully. And what I want to summarize is basically the need for touch points. You can't,
Mhm.
when you're totally separate from something, we love to say, assumptions make an ass of you and me. Like when
Mhm.
you're not in contact with someone, it's very easy to build up assumptions in a story and just you drift apart. And there's no opportunity then for you to get into the deeper stuff that's like holding you back from having a close relationship. So you do have to have those, reach out and have those conversations, and whether it's just like a simple text or whatever. So for your listener, just starting to send a text thinking of you, or, hey, I saw this and, thought you might enjoy, or whatever it is, just trying to create the superficial, the light
Yeah.
connections. Then,
Funny things you saw on TikTok are a great way
yeah,
to like start,
yeah,
just like,
exactly. But it needs to be centered around them. It can't just be
right.
like, like here's the latest thing I'm obsessed with, or it can't be you
Yes.
focused, be them focused. Like seriously, try to
Like
center them.
this made me think of you.
Yeah, this made me think of you. And then that builds a lot of goodwill. And then that opens up the space to have a more nuanced or heartfelt or maybe tender conversation about things that might be lying under the surface.
I love that. And especially the clarification when you send something, you're trying to rekindle a relationship with a sister, with whomever, make it about them. Make it about
Hmm.
something you remember them liking, whether it's flowers or, bees or whatever it is. Just think,
Cats eating sushi,
cats eating
always
sushi.
amusing.
Cats eating sushi. Haven't seen that. I'll have to check it
Oh yeah,
out.
TikTok,
Oh,
it's full of funny cat videos. That's always a good place to start. My daughter
okay.
taught me that.
And the things we learn from our from our children that can help us be better siblings, soul sisters, all of those things. Our kids are some of our greatest teachers. Absolutely. My goodness, Sabrina and Eunice, you both know I could just chat to you for hours. Even the books on the back shelves I see and all of the beautiful things in your environment, Eunice. I'm so grateful to know both of you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Where can our listeners find you?
So they can find us online at hellolucky.com and also on Instagram at helloluckycards and helloluckykids. So we love hearing from our readers and listeners. And our latest books, which you mentioned, are My Sister is Super, which is a board book that is intended to be read to toddlers, just celebrating sisters and encouraging them to really appreciate their sisters and to kind of hopefully bypass some of the sibling rivalry. And our comic book, our graphic novel series, The Cosmic Adventures of Astrid and Stella, this is really inspired by our sister relationship growing up overseas, except, instead of moving around to countries, our characters are moving around to different planets. But there are tons of examples of funny sibling conflicts in these. So it's a great book for, kids who have siblings to read because they'll really be able to relate to the relationship between the two protagonists.
A lot of it is definitely inspired from the sibling sort of interactions of our own kids and of ourselves, like things that we really remember going through.
And I just have to say, I'm a firm believer that children's books are not just for kids. Children's books are some of my favorite books. And I can just imagine picking up, one of your sister books and sending it to an adult sister and saying, this makes me think of you. And so
Absolutely.
I absolutely. And so we know where to find you both. Eunice, I imagine we'll just have to look for you in a roller skating park or somewhere.
Yes,
Somewhere in France.
roller skating, good for the soul. Roller skating in France, even better.
Well, thank you both. So appreciative, and thank you for giving such loving attention to our listeners' question today. I hope it elevates her life and the lives of our listeners. Thank you so much. So grateful. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.